Hello. This is a subject that was discussed a little bit in passing, perhaps, yesterday in my 7 hour plus stream, and I recommend that you have a listen. A lot of subjects were covered, and one of the questions that I think I have answered that I have asked of Church of Entropy quite a few times was the connection between physical laws and moral laws. She has never been able to give a satisfactory answer because, well, I guess she hasn't thought of it, but I think I have. So what Church of Entropy does when she tries to impress on us her knowledge of the laws of physics and cause and effect, I think is interesting in that she is equating moral laws with physical laws, and for quite a while I couldn't see couldn't see how they were related, and why she was so anxious to link the two, because there doesn't seem to be any link between the two, because physical laws, as we understand it, is a law of gravity, and it will, it's basically the predictability of some natural phenomenon, such as an apple falling from a tree, attracted by the law of gravity. So, on Earth it would always, hit the ground rather than float up in the sky when the apple lost contact with its tree. So we're talking here about predictability, and in terms of moral laws, there is supposed to be a predictability in that there will be, there is crime and there is punishment, supposedly. So if we commit murder, theft, a sexual offence, then we should expect punishment. But then it doesn't necessarily follow, does it? What happens is that the criminal, the perpetrator, can escape justice, and also somebody else might be falsely accused and wrongly convicted. So human laws do not have the same predictability as physical laws. So we may be forgiven for saying, well, it's not really related. But I was trying to answer the question that I asked of Jen, that she couldn't answer. Obviously, she talks about physical laws to show off how clever she is and how stupid we are for not understanding the law of physics, and in her view, non-physicists do not deserve the right to statecraft or even the privilege of enjoying her teachings, of being close to having access to her teachings. But these moral laws, which are said to be from God, what are we to make of the problem of there being a certain unpredictability of outcome when a criminal murders, rapes, steals? Some people seem to get away with it. Some people seem protected from the consequences of their actions. Is there something that can be learned from this. And what can be done about it? I mean, obviously the solution to criminals not being apprehended, tried and convicted is down to human error. It's a law and order problem that these people commit their crimes and get away with it, or are even caught but not sufficiently punished in order to be a deterrent. We have hints in scripture such as an eye for an eye, a limb for a limb, a life for a life. This would be an argument for proportionality. Obviously, what you do to me and what I do in retaliation against the wrong that you committed against me should not exceed the harm that you have done me. It should be proportionate. So force should be proportionate, the compensation should be proportionate, and if this were perfectly applied, I think the reasoning is that then very few crimes would be committed, because when we do bad things, we expect to get away with it, which is why we did it in the first place. If we knew, as a matter of certainty, that the moment we murdered someone, committed a sexual offence against them or stole their property, that punishment, retribution would be immediate, then we wouldn't do it at all. So this gap between the wrong that we commit and our punishment, there sometimes is an enormous gap until we don't even know what we might have been punished for, and I suppose there are times when we do bad things, wrong things that we're not even aware were wrong at the time. But if you believe in God, then you would believe in the narrative that the good go to heaven and the bad go to hell, and every good deed will be rewarded and every evil deed punished, with an element of mercy. And we cannot expect everything to be properly punished in this life, and there's a possibility that our reward will not come in this life, and will only come in the next. And of course there will be the problem of believing in this in this scenario. Some people will immediately think, well, I can't believe in this. It's taking such a risk to forego all the pleasures that I clearly want to enjoy in this my only life, that I'm not going to give it up. I'll remain an atheist and enjoy all the pleasures of hedonism and sex and drugs and rock and roll and all the things that I would be prevented from doing if I were religious and God-fearing. But can we extrapolate from the fall of civilizations whether there is some particular correlation between sin and the decline and fall of our civilization? And I'm suggesting to you that there is obviously a link. It seems that all civilizations fall for very similar reasons. We were talking yesterday about the Thucydides trap. We talked about great empires really just doing the same thing in a very predictable way. Thucydides was a historian from ancient Greece who recorded the Peloponnesian War, and this was okay, I'll look up Thucydides now. I should have done that before. So basically the idea is that all empires that are declining will fall into this trap because they think if they don't strike now, they will become weaker if they wait a bit longer. So they will take risks, they will gamble, which is not a very wise thing to do because all wars are gambles and everything always takes longer and requires more expenditure than you originally expected or planned for. So it's also an idea that was made popular by Graham T. Allison, who spotted a pattern, I suppose. So he's Graham Tillett Allison Jr. was an American, he's still alive, is an American political scientist at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. So, the Thucydides trap refers to the theory that when one great power threatens to displace another, war is almost always the result. Thucydides, let's see exactly who he was. He was an Athenian historian and general. His history of the Peloponnesian War recounts a 5th century BC war between Sparta and Athens until the year 411 BC. Thucydides has been dubbed the father of scientific history by those who accept his claim claims to have applied strict standards of impartiality and evidence gathering and analysis of cause and effect without reference to intervention by the deities, as outlined in his introduction to his work. So he's been called the father of the school of political realism, which views the political behaviour of individuals and the subsequent outcomes of relations between states as ultimately mediated by and constructed upon the emotions of fear and self-interest. His text is still studied at universities and military colleges worldwide. The Melian Dialogue is regarded as a seminal work of international relations theory, while his version of Pericles' funeral oration is widely studied by political theorists, historians, and students of the classics. More generally, Thucydides developed an understanding of human nature to explain behaviour to such crises as plagues, massacres, and civil war. Yeah, I must read it properly. So this is what happens to all empires. Why do I mention this? Because he seems to be saying, Allison seems to be saying that it is a law of human nature. Now this is always what happens when one empire, and of course empires last hundreds of years, some thousands of years, in the case of China, about 6,000 years. So there are certain principles that can be abstracted from such a lengthy history. The Chinese talk about. I don't pretend to be especially knowledgeable about Chinese history, but Yin and Yang is something that yet Westerners will have heard of. I'll read you a short bit about that from thoughtco.com. I find it very useful in giving very succinct definitions of what are considered very difficult ideas. So it says, Yin and Yang is a complex relational concept in Chinese culture that has developed over thousands of years. Briefly put, the meaning of Yin and Yang is that the universe is governed by a cosmic duality, sets of two opposing and complementing principles or cosmic energies that can be observed in nature. This makes me think of... No, I don't know if I pronounce it right. I don't know if I can spell it right. Minachianism or something, I think. Something I've been accused of. Manichaeanism, I think, is the correct pronunciation. Manichaeism. This is an idea of a kind of binary view of the world. I've often been accused of that being, binary. So, Manichaeism taught an elaborate dualistic cosmology describing the struggle between a good spiritual world of light and an evil material world of darkness. Through an ongoing process that takes place in human history, light is gradually removed from the world of matter and returned to the world of light, whence it came. Its beliefs were based on local Mesopotamian religious movements and Gnosticism. Interestingly, Manichaeism was briefly the main rival to Christianity before the spread of Islam in competition to replace before the spread of Islam in the competition to replace classical paganism. Manichaeism survived longer in the East than in the West, and it appears to have finally faded away after the 14th century in South China. But I think it's a pretty generic idea. And obviously the binary system is a kind of system that is deliberately black and white, because the whole purpose of being black and white is to facilitate decision and action based on that decision. And obviously, you program a computer with a binary code in order to make it obey the commands that you want it to obey. So Yin and Yang is a philosophy. The Yin-Yang philosophy says that the future is composed of competing and complementary forces of dark and light, sun and moon, male and female. The philosophy is at least 3,500 years old, discussed in the 9th century BCE, text known as I Ching, or Book of Changes, and influences of the philosophies of Taoism and Confucianism. The yin-yang symbol is related to the ancient method used to track the movements of the sun, moon, and stars around the year. Generally speaking, yin is characterized as inward energy that is feminine, still, dark, and negative. On the other hand, yang is characterized as outward energy, masculine, hot, bright, and positive. a subtle and cosmic duality. Yin and Yang elements come in pairs, such as the moon and the sun, female and male, dark and bright, cold and hot, passive and active, and so on. But note that Yin and Yang are not static or mutually exclusive terms. While the world is composed of many different, sometimes opposing forces, these can coexist and even complement each other. Sometimes forces opposite in nature even rely on one another to exist. The nature of yin-yang lies in the interchange and interplay of the two components. The alternation of day and night is just such an example. There cannot be a shadow without a light. The balance of yin and yang is important. If yin is stronger, yang will be weaker, and vice versa. Yin and yang can interchange between certain conditions so that they are usually not yin and yang alone. In other words, yin elements can contain certain parts of yang, and yang can have some components of yin. This balance of yin and yang is perceived to exist in everything, including, I would argue, the Jew and Gentile relationship. You can't have one without the other. The yin-yang symbol. The yin-yang symbol, also known as the Tai Chi symbol, consists of a circle divided into two halves by a curved line. One half of the circle is black, typically representing the yin side. The other is white for the yang side. A dot of each colour is situated near the centre of the other's half. The two halves are thus intertwining across a spiral-like curve that splits the whole into semicircles, and the small dots represent the idea that both sides carry the seed of the other. The white dot in the black area and the black dot in the white area connote coexistence and unity of opposites to form a whole. The curvy line signifies that there are no absolute separations between the two opposites. The yin-yang symbol then embodies both sides: duality, paradox, unity and diversity, change and harmony. Origin of yin and yang. The concept of yin-yang has a long history. There are many written records about yin and yang, some dating back to the Yin dynasty about 1400 to 1100 BCE, and the Western Zhou dynasty 1100 to 771 BCE. The oldest records of the yin-yang principle are found in the Zhou Yi, also called the I Ching, or the Book of Changes, which was written by King Wen in the 9th century BCE during the Western Zhou dynasty. The Jing portion of Zhou Yi particularly talks about the flow of yin and yang in nature. The concept became increasingly popular during the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period in ancient Chinese history. The idea has influenced thousands of years of Chinese philosophers, including scholars associated with Taoism such as Lao Tzu and Confucianism such as Confucius himself. It underlies Asian martial arts, medicine, science, literature, politics, daily behaviour, beliefs, and intellectual pursuits. The origin of the yin-yang symbol is found in the ancient Chinese timekeeping system of using a pole. I don't want to read all that. Let's see how much there is. Actually, I'll read all that because it's only 2 more paragraphs. The origin of the yin-yang symbol is found in the ancient Chinese timekeeping system of using a pole to measure the changing lengths of shadow over the solar year. It was invented in China at least as long ago as 600 BCE. In fact, some have suggested that the yin-yang symbol closely approximates a graphical representation of the daily change of a pole's shadow length during the year. Yang begins at the winter solstice and indicates the beginning of the period when daylight dominates over darkness and thus is associated with the sun. The yin begins at the summer solstice and represents the dominance of darkness over daylight and is associated with the moon. Yin-yang also represents the observation of the shadow of the Earth on the moon and the record of the position of the Big Dipper constellation through the year. These observations make up the 4 points of the compass. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. The direction of the shortest shadow measured is south, and at night the pole star points north. Thus, yin and yang are fundamentally connected with the annual cycle of the Earth around the sun and the resulting 4 seasons. So yeah, it's used in feng shui and medicine. And I guess what it's really saying is balance is all, and it might also mean moderation is all. But of course that's not enough to extrapolate from that how to behave in every circumstance, and but the idea is really that you can't have an aristocracy without a peasantry. For example, you can't have male without female, in the sense that if you separated all the men and women, from each other forever, then you just kill the human race. But there'll be other, subtler manifestations of yin and yang, usually through abstract ideas and the predominance of certain abstract ideas over other abstract ideas. What comes to mind is my patriarchy, matriarchy pairing. And we come to the question of predictability again. I would say that yin and yang has a relevance to patriarchy and matriarchy, in that the pivot upon which gender justice lies is marriage. So this is how the sexes are supposed to make the most important bargain in their lives with each other, i.e. marriage, if they want to do that sort of thing, and most people do, because people, I suppose, usually they have a good experience of their parents and they want to have their own families and have their own children and perpetuate themselves in this way through having descendants and that sort of thing. And of course this is something that suits the state, which would want workers and soldiers and cannon fodder for imperial wars and that kind of thing. And so we are back into the realm of politics and morality, because politics is about morality, even though I suppose people will say there's nothing moral about politics. But really, when you think about it, the same parts of our brain get triggered when we are talking about politics or morality or religion, because we all grow up with certain assumptions of what is right and wrong. And even though we don't agree with each other about what is right and wrong, we all seem to know, we all seem to think we know what it is, even though we're wrong. And we have certain predictable emotions that are triggered when we speak to somebody whose ideas are diametrically opposed to ours. And of course people do kill each other over political disagreements, because of course the worst of these will result in a revolution or a war. And obviously politics is all about preventing war and revolution, or causing it and, well, winning the game. So we go back to the question of the laws of physics and the laws of morality. So the laws of nature would, I guess, include, natural law would include the law of physics, and there are certain ideas of natural law which people call logos, and I guess this is all about, well, you know, this should be obvious to you that, you know, if you hurt me, then you would expect me to hate you. This is and expect me to revenge myself on you, and you know, the kind of obvious things that you would expect to happen, bearing in mind human nature. So if you're kind to me, then you should expect me to be kind to you, and if you give me things and I like them, I'll say thank you. I might even like you and love you, and you know, all kinds of things. And I guess we use our knowledge of these predicted and predictable outcomes to advance our own interests. And of course there is, you know, a bigger picture. So there is the short-term one and the long-term one. And, you know, which is better? Obviously we have to know what we're doing, and the context with you know, the context that we are doing something. And I guess often we don't really know what we are doing, or the context in which we are acting. I'll try to give an example. Well, a good example would be casual sex. So one might have casual sex, and it might be all right until unwanted pregnancy is the consequence. So the female might she might get the guy to marry her, or she might get an abortion, or she might have the baby anyway. So I guess these are the things that might happen, that will well, you know, the three of these outcomes, you know, whichever option she chooses would affect her for the rest of her life. And well, even if she chooses to have the abortion, she would, well, know that she had one, and this would have an effect on her mind and her outlook about motherhood and men and children. And I guess if she had lots and lots of abortions, she would, well, she wouldn't be a very nice lady, I guess, because it would mean that she was stupid, and she was promiscuous, and she was, well, maybe not the kind of woman that you would want for the wife of your children. And of course, if she had too many abortions, that she would become sterile, like Germaine Greer did. So all these acts that might not take that much time to happen between, well, intercourse can typically take only a few minutes, and then the woman might be impregnated, and her life change as a consequence of being impregnated. So probably she wouldn't, I mean, if she was, you know, a woman that didn't understand the facts of life about the birds and the bees, then then it would be very foolish indeed for, of her to do that sort of thing. And if she did, but she carried on, it would suggest something about her background and her thought processes, that she that such a thing happened to her. So I don't know how clear it is to people who do have casual sex, what they think they're doing. But at any rate, nobody seems to want to question this kind of behaviour. And of course the next question to ask is whether this kind of behaviour has any impact on society, on the national interest, on the longevity of the empire, if you are part of that. And it seems that all empires, what did Chekhov say about families? I think something about all families being happy in the same way or not in the same way. Let me look it up for you. Chekhov and happy families. No, it's actually by Leo Tolstoy. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. I don't know if that's even true, I suppose. Oh. But I think all empires fall for the usual. Okay, I would say that they all fall when they've when they commit the 7 deadly sins, and all of these things were being warned against in the Bible, and even if we don't, even if the Bible, the Old and New Testament, is not a holy book, we would have some version of its prohibitions in our culture, or the usual ones about good behaviour and humility and asking forgiveness for our sins and wrongs and that sort of thing. So we come to the question of sin and what it is, and obviously, it's bad for us to be indulging, individually, to indulge in the sins of anger, envy, pride, lust, sloth, greed, gluttony. Good, I've got all 7 of them. So if this is unchecked, then you have a whole nation doing all these things. And I guess if this nation indulges in all the 7 deadly sins all at the same time, and then, to the fullest possible extent, then its civilization will fall. And I mean, why would it fall? I guess it would fall because you would be horrible people who are horrible parents, who have children who become even more horrible than you are, and your behaviour will be so hateful, and you would be so stupid and lazy that you'll just destroy yourselves with your internal strife, and you'll never ever agree with each other to solve or avoid obvious problems, because you are so, because nobody would listen to each other, and you wouldn't even have a command structure or a leader. So, even quite obvious problems that would be easily solved by people cooperating would not be done. And I think this is where we are now in the West, because we live in a matriarchy, and nobody will listen to anybody else because they'll think, oh, we don't have to, you can't make me, I don't like it, and the usual shit. But that's because we live in a matriarchy, and a matriarchy has a social hierarchy that is very buck passing. So if I describe to you the social hierarchy of a patriarchy, it would be like a pyramid. So you get all these beta males choosing their alpha male leader. The females, the alpha female would be the sex partner, or the wife, of the alpha male leader, and the beta female would be the sex partner of the beta male, and so the social status of a woman would be dictated by the social status of a father or her husband. You might think that's very restrictive, but it's clear anyway. It's clear who fits in where. But in the matriarchy, I guess no society actually says, oh, we're a matriarchy now. They'll always say, oh, maybe a matriarchy might be better or more fun or whatever, and then they'll always deny that they live in a matriarchy, because living in a matriarchy is like saying, oh, my civilization has got cancer, and because of matriarchy, matriarchies are all declining, primitive, extinct, and soon to be extinct societies, and they will always be exploited, like the Native American by the white settlers. They basically can't fight invasion, and unfortunately that is how Western man is now. And I think I've worked out the vulnerabilities of the Western political system, and I think I'm pretty clear about what I think should be done. I don't think my own dear mother has once complained that I speak too clearly. So I don't think I'm. It's not because that I don't speak clearly and people don't understand me. I think I do speak clearly, people do understand me, but they make a choice. They make the choice of ignoring me. Why do they ignore me? Obviously because they don't want to do what I suggest that they do, and they don't want to do it because they are suffering from all the 7 deadly sins of pride, anger, envy, sloth, lust, gluttony, and greed. But they're basically saying, well, you may be right, Claire, but you haven't got an army and you can't make us do what you say we should do, and so we'll just continue ignoring you. And this is unfortunately the attitude of most people. Some of you are in the chat, I know, Jen, and that's why I consider you so crucial to my plans, because I think if I can reform you, if I can change your mind, if I can persuade you, then there would be hope for the rest of the West. And I know your attitudes are pretty entrenched by now, and you probably think, oh, I've got away with it so far, I've got away with it. But I think, well, we don't know. We don't know how long we will get away with it for. And maybe we don't want to be moral fugitives. Maybe we want to be good, honest, decent people who can face the truth without flinching and running away and pretending it didn't happen or whatever. So I do think that the problems of the West are in fact insoluble. I think it could easily be solved, and I think it could easily, in theory anyway, be understood by somebody who thinks that I've got it exactly right about my diagnosis and my solutions are also exactly right, and it's time to, well, make the correction and accept it. I don't think I've said anything illogical. I mean, it's all, within the narrative of the three Abrahamic faiths. So what I said about Jews and Gentiles being complementary and necessary for each other's existence, it makes perfect sense that, if you have Jews, you have to, to be Jewish would be utterly meaningless if it weren't for Gentiles. So, if you were to look at this, the Abrahamic view, it would be kind of binary, yeah? Plebs and patricians, aristocracy and peasantry, Jew and Gentile. And I mean, in a way, the choice is so obvious. So if you believe in this sort of the Jewish narrative, you would have the, it's like, okay, the Torah, that's the divine scripture of the Jews, and then the Gentiles themselves didn't really have divine scripture until Muhammad came along, because obviously the New Testament doesn't count at all because it's not divine, and not even Christians claim the New Testament to be divine. So both Jews and Gentile have their respective divine revelations. And of course, Jews can't really say, oh, but the Quran, that ain't true, because within their own rules, you can say, well, you've got your idea of the Noahide laws, which is a universal minimum moral standard. And if you don't think that Islam is quite Noahide because you have such impossibly high standards, then I'm afraid you'll have to read the Quran and tell us which bit is not Noahide-observant, and that would be the way to do it with the rabbis. I've spoken to a few of them, and the ones I've spoken, they show a certain disdain, or first they say, I don't want to read it, I don't have to read it, I don't need to read it, and oh yeah, and anyway, I've been forbidden to read it. So they've already got four good and ready excuses not to read it, and of course the only way to get them to say that the Quran is Noahide is to get them to read it, and I guess if they refuse to read it, then we'll have to think of another way of making them read it. And I'm saying to Muslims, I'm saying you should get in touch and make start a campaign to get all the money together to pay for the cash prizes for my proposed Rabbi-only essay writing competition on why the Quran is Noahide compliant. And I think it would be the easiest thing in the world if the cash prizes were big enough, because Jewish opinion on this is divided anyway. So they're saying, the Rambam said that Gentiles are not allowed to create their own religion. And to this, I would just say, God greater than Maimonides. And we also know what the things that Maimonides said about Muhammad, which is that he called him a lunatic and a did he call him anything else? I'll just look it up. So I know he got into trouble with the Muslims. He called him a lunatic. So obviously that was kind of bad blood between Maimonides and the Muslims. Why was he so rude about Muslims? I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry. So I guess I need to find out why he had such a problem with the Muslims. Okay, so there was a time in when the Berber dynasty, the Almohads, conquered Cordoba in 1148 and abolished dhimmi status in some of their territories. The loss of this status left the Jewish and Christian communities with conversion to Islam, death or exile. Well, they were not supposed to do that, were they? According to chapter 2, verse 256, many Jews were forced to convert, but due to suspicion by the authorities of fake conversions, the new converts had to wear identifying clothing that set them apart and made them subject to public scrutiny. Maimonides' family, along with most other Jews, chose exile. Some say, though, that it is likely that Maimonides feigned a conversion to Islam before escaping. This forced conversion was legally invalid under Islamic law when brought up by a rival in Egypt. Okay, so I guess he was badly treated by the Muslims. Anyway, whatever injustices Maimonides suffered by the hands of the Muslim, the fact remains is that God is obviously more correct than Maimonides. And we go back to the problem of moral laws and physical laws, and I suppose to sum up, I will I'll just say that moral laws take a longer time to take effect. So you won't get the immediate chain of causation, because there's such a long gap between your civilization actually falling, and there's so many other factors to take into consideration. So the likelihood is that a lot of historians will be arguing that, there's so many things. I think, Rome fell because of this, and then another historian will say it fell because of that, or and of course these will be, unprovable in the end, and then people will just simply lose interest. But if you have this idea of morality, which you can obviously easily find in the Quran and the Torah, you can actually work out where things went wrong. It's like, well, there's this civilization, this nation, this empire were not supposed to do a whole bunch of things, and they did. And of course, any law will have some evidence of its passing, in records and things. So you'll say, oh, the moment they legalized gay marriage, stuff happened, and it can all be dated back to whatever, or whenever the Americans separated their the church from their state, and all these things can still be scrutinized, discovered, and discussed by historians, but they don't seem to be doing that sort of thing. And obviously my reading of history is not the usual reading of history by conventional historians, and of course I have no particular specialization in history, but I think all the points I make cannot be refuted, really. They can be ignored, of course, but I think they make sense. And one of the things I would say about the success of the British Empire when it was at its peak was that it was unconsciously Muslim, in that it was sort of doing all the things anyway that the Quran advised, until it kind of moved away from doing that. And so well, it's a shame that I can't really get anyone, I can't discuss any of my ideas with any public intellectual, because I've become tarred with this brush of being the alt-right. I have no regrets. I think I like to think that I will eventually be noticed and my genius acknowledged, because I do perform this unique service for white people, and I think I hope I will be seen as somebody helpful, because I do have a unique perspective on why I think your civilization has gone wrong, and it is quite I think the points can be understood by an intelligent 12-year-old, really. So I'm not nervous about not being understood, though I understand that I will probably continue to be ignored. And why am I being ignored? Because of the cowardice of Western man and the intransigence of Western women, particularly Jen Sharp. So much hangs on how Jen will behave, and I know she has no particular desire to do what I say, and she's so full of pride and stubbornness. But I hope eventually, reason and decency will prevail. Who are you, quantum entanglement? So yeah, I kind of feel I have to focus on Jen because she's an archetype. Jen complains it's an obsession. I would call it focus. I am focused on what I said I'd do. I don't mind telling you again and again that this is what I intend to do. So I think probably changing Jen's mind is about as difficult as getting Western man to listen to me. So I'll just keep focusing on persuading you of, the truth, logic, and morality of my solution. So that's all I have to say on the matter, that the real difference between physical laws and moral laws is that the cause and effect of bad stuff that we do that leads to the fall of our empire is not immediate and obvious, and we can only just have an inkling of it when we refer to the moral laws that we ought to be following. Am I going to be on Week in Review, Jen? I'm feeling a little tired, so I may not be able to stay up for that. But yeah, I answered the question I asked you, didn't I, Jen? So I'm quite pleased about that. Thank you all for coming by, and I'll talk to you again soon, no doubt.